Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 12. Today, we will spend the first part of the video on sorting out most of the town deliveries. It's kind of important to have the infrastructure ready for the rest of the cargo to go to. This will mostly involve placing some extra truck stops around the towns where we are already delivering stuff, so we can actually reach the entire city. And once that's done, we will move on to something a bit more relaxing, and we will do the first decorating session around the station we dealt with in the last episode. We will set up the tracks splitting and merging to and from the main line, and at the end we will place some props to make the place a bit more interesting to look at, like wagons waiting inside tracks, along with some locomotives. I didn't have any shunter assets, so we will just use some locomotives I found, at least until I find some alternatives. Before we get started, if this is not your first video from this channel, you already know what to expect. If you want to be kept up to date, please consider subscribing, and if you like what you see, leaving a like will also help letting me know what to focus on. But enough talking, let's get into it. The first thing I want to accomplish is the truck station near this freight hub. As we did with the other two, we will first place the station buildings, and then we will squeeze the road stop into the spaces that can accept it. The terrain is a bit too uneven for my liking, so we should make it completely level, and then we can reconnect the roads. Nobody's using them anyway. That should do the trick. Simple stuff. We should still extend the platforms that can be made longer, so more goods can be piled onto them. So, Camden is still not connected to the freight network. Let's fix that right now. Since we are only ever going to unload stuff in town, we only need to use the roadside stops, but we need to ensure complete coverage of all the industrial and commercial buildings. Then we put them into a line, connecting everything to the freight hub. I have no idea how many delivery trucks we should use for these just yet. I will simply give 10 to each, and see how far that gets us. We can add more if necessary. Let's do Wembley next. It's the same exact story. It's not yet on the freight network, so we place some truck stops to cover everything, connect it to the hub, and put some trucks on the line. Next, I wanted to make sure all the vehicles that enter towns are set to be at least on medium maintenance. That only gives them a 50% condition, so they will still give out more noise pollution than they would if they had 100%, but it's a start. Right now, all of these E-trucks are set to the lowest setting, so even though they are the least noisy truck we have, they are still louder than they could be. And we are officially out of money. I forgot to reset the pathing of the passenger trains. For a second I thought that error message said that we didn't have a depot in range, but then I saw our bank balance. That was a pretty good reminder what needs to be done. I guess the easiest way of finding problematic trains is to just sort the list of vehicles by profitability, and make sure that the ones making the biggest loss are actually running. Okay, I think the passenger services should be unblocked now. But, we are still in the red, and it will take a little bit of time to really start bouncing back. How about we hitch a ride on one of them, and use that as a way to run the clock forward? I considered both freight and passenger trains for this, and in the end I chose a passenger train. This tunnel seemed to be having some trouble keeping the tracks aligned with each other. We might want to look into fixing that someday. Okay, I think it's time to check the bank balance now. 55 million. We are back in business. This area is a bit convoluted, so let's make sure everything is going where they should. For example, we only had that old bricks line going to the town we now call Paddington. We need to sort out a proper cargo service for it. Two lines going to Paddington? Oh, right, we swapped names with Kilburn, that other line should be named after that place. Let's do that city next. As we know, it already has a line servicing it, but it doesn't have full coverage yet, so we need to add more stops. Well, that was unfortunate. I placed the truck drop-off point too close to the bus stop, and it changed it over. A bit of a shame, but I think we should still have enough passenger coverage. We just need to find a position for it in the cargo line to at least give some semblance of organization. Next up, Greenwich. This place also needs some love, since the only truck stop doesn't even get close to covering everything. Okay, there's no way I will let that routing slide. Let's try again. Not the best, but better than it was. And it seems we completely forgot about Harrow. That's because it doesn't require tools, so we didn't set up a line for it when that's all we had running around. Let's do one last check to make sure trucks are having the appropriate level of maintenance, and we can move on. We also need to take care of Kensington. That should be pretty straightforward, it's a small place. Yeah, I think we only need to add one more station to have a good enough coverage. Seeing those trucks waiting at the station, I decided to also check for these kinds of waiting behaviors in the lines. To avoid having a traffic jam developing in the freight hubs, they should be free-flowing, I think. I set them to not wait for a full load, and they are still there. Peculiar behavior. Oh, right. I told them to have a minimum waiting time, not a maximum. My bad. They are pretty visible, so I'm sure I will notice them later, and now that I know what the issue is, it will be a quick fix. I also decided to give the passenger lines some extra signals. Technically, they don't need them right now, since we have more stations than trains, and stations also act as signals as they are letting trains go. But you know, in case we need them, it will be nice to have them around. Nice, I see a lot of goods waiting for pickup. Let's extend the platforms, so we can store more stuff on them. Well, that rightmost platform cannot be made longer, so we should reassign that line to one of the bigger ones. These old brickwork stations are also not needed now, so they can go. I also noticed that I accidentally used town roads instead of country ones here. Let's switch them out, the rural ones have higher speed limits. And I am a bit fed up with the way these tracks look, with all that white gravel around them. Thankfully, we can just paint over them with some grass textures. Now that looks way better. So, let's do this little switch yard again, and let's do it properly this time. Instead of using short tracks, we will now use a bit of a longer run up to the station platforms, leaving enough room for some proper side tracks. With these longer entrances, we need to move the mainline connections a bit, so we can do them smoothly. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. Now, the most important thing is to actually give all the platforms a way to be accessed from the main line, in case we want to add more trains to them. Unfortunately, the tracks cannot bend fast enough to really allow for all the lanes to be branching off the central track. Thankfully, there is a workaround. Instead of having the switch onto that main branch, we can just split off one of the neighboring tracks. Yeah, something like that. 2 of those tracks go into the station itself, and the other 2 will be used to store parked wagons and locomotives. Oh please, let me have this one. The curvature is simply too narrow. Let's try placing that one first, and then we can put in the other one. So far so good. Now we just need to add the last 2 storage lanes, and this side of the station is done. And that about does it, I think. Although, I don't really like how dense those catenaries are. Since we don't really need them on the parking lanes, we can just get rid of them on those tracks. Maybe even downgrade them to have wooden sleepers. Sure, why not? It helps to differentiate between the proper high traffic tracks, and the ones that are only used to park stuff. And this is pretty much the same thing we will do on this side too. Although it is much more busy, so it requires a lot more careful track placement. So, with everyone out of the way, let's start by creating a clean slate. This place is so convoluted, there were moments when I wished I drew a diagram of what goes where, before getting started. At least we can just click on the station itself, and check which lines are using which platform, and act accordingly. Nope, I'm not convinced this will work. We need to run the tracks in parallel for a bit, and then split them off from each other. Let's put in the whatchamacallit. You know, I don't really know the technical term for this thing. I just call it the main branching track. Not as smooth as I would have liked, but the speeds are acceptable this close to the station. We only need to hook up the lumber delivery lines, which all go to a single platform. I think that's the wrong one. Good thing I built the passing section on this side of the tracks, makes it super easy to make the change in a second. Yep, we need to use the other entrance. In fact, we don't need to connect that other platform to anything on this side. Now, this is the only switch that I will simply have to make peace with. Thanks to the presence of the level crossing, there is no real way of placing this without having this big curve in it. I suppose we could just make the main branching track to have a bit of a shallower angle compared to the other lanes, that should allow for the switches to also be a bit more tolerant of the turning radii. We still need to add this one slip track. The angles are too wide to accept a slip switch, so we have to do it this way. Another reason to consider rebuilding the branching track. All that's left is to place the switches for the parking tracks. Okay, let's fix them to not have catenaries, and downgrade them to wooden sleepers, and it should be done. I didn't really like how the switches still had concrete sleepers on them though, but there's nothing I can do about that. It's just the way it is. As far as I can tell, the lines should be back to normal. I didn't check today, but we will absolutely need to double check each train to make sure they are not confused about their pathing. We also need to hook the depot back onto the mainline tracks. I can already see some potential improvements. I would love to try to give the main branching track that shallower angle, just to see if we can split all the switches off it that way. We'll have to give it a try between episodes. Anyways, how about we place some off-duty wagons and locomotives on these parking lanes? The unfortunate thing is, I didn't have any shunters among my list of prop assets, so I only placed some locomotives as placeholders. But since then, I got a collection of Class 8 shunters, and they can be placed in this fashion too, so we can replace these in the next video. I really wish all mods came with these kinds of decorative versions. I would have loved to place some of those container cars on these tracks, or the state cars we are actually using. I'm sure they are on the workshop somewhere, so I will need to look deeper into it. It's a real shame that some of these decorative versions are turned on, and they still show exhaust coming out from the top. Doesn't look like they are parked if they are turned on. That's enough on this side, let's place some more on the other end. Yeah, this will do for now. I will try to find some more prop wagons and other rail yard decorations on the workshop, but it already looks relatively nice. I guess we can finish things off by placing some trees. These places between the tracks feel a bit empty, so let's fill them in. Not too bad for a first attempt. And it literally is a first attempt. I never done anything like this in the game before, since I never had to make things look nice for an audience until now. I really hope it was worth the hassle. Of course, it's still missing a lot of things, extra buildings, fences, and as I've said, I see many points that I want to change already, but it's getting there. I think in the next episode, We will take care of the rest of the cities in terms of cargo deliveries. I think we still need to deal with Tottenham, Sudbury, and of course the central city of London. I suspect we will only give those some kind of mini freight stations, just so we can deliver the finished products there, and then take them into town. I doubt we will build any more big freight hubs. Anyways, if you haven't done it already, I'd love it if you subscribe to the channel, and leaving a like would also let me know that this video was worth making. If you feel that it was good enough, and you can afford it, please consider going to my Ko-fi page, which you can find in the description, and donate an amount that you feel is appropriate. And if you did like what you've seen, there should be links to some of my other videos and playlists on the screen. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you in the next one.